Bene, partiamo. Allora, ringrazio tutti per essere qui. Io sono Federico Del Bianco.
Thank you for being here. My name is Federico Del Bianco of Masottina Winery. I'm the generation of the Bianco family. Masottina was established in 1946 in Conegliano. My grandfather was the founder. We run 280 hectares approximately between our and growers, and we are in the northeastern area of Conegliano. Today we're going to taste a flight of 6 glasses from our winery. In particular, they are part of our Terroir range. It's a collection that to us stands for the purest identity of our soils and of our terroirs and climates. There will be 2 designations involved: Prosecco DOC and Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco DOC, and 2 more wines of the Conegliano Valdobbiadene will be 2 Rive, so the most prized slopes. That represents the best of our production and the identity of our vineyards. Now, the meetings will be guided by 2 excellent speakers and friends, Cristina and Filippo. And I would also like to thank the wine lovers and the professionals who are online from Hong Kong and Shenzhen. And I suggest we start. Again, thank you all. Let's get the ball rolling. Good morning, Milan, and good morning from also to the people on the other side of the world. No, every day we taste. I don't know about you, but I heard we're all professionals. At least I make 5,000. I taste 5,000 glasses per year, and the tastings that make sense are those that are organized around a goal. Now, tasting is very common. Wherever you walk into a bar, you ask for a glass of Prosecco, and sometimes it's not even Prosecco. So this is like the Fort Knox of Italian designations, and therefore there is a big number of bottles. Federico, I think there are like 650 million bottles marketed globally every year. So we're really in front, we're really standing in front of the most important bubbly in the whole world. I mean, most of the Prosecco that you'll find around is a sparkling Prosecco, because there's also a semi-sparkling version, and it accounts for 84% of the market. And we're talking about a Charmat or Martinotti method in most cases, with a pressure in terms of bars between 4 and 5. On average, you know that the Prosecco or semi-sparkling Prosecco has a lower pressure. Prosecco is a much more subtle and delicate wine than its success and renown may suggest. So when you enjoy big fame, perhaps people are led into believing that you don't need a tasting to understand the product better. So this the goal today is, on the contrary, to delve deeper into the product. So Cristina and myself this morning will taste, each of us, 3, actually 4, belonging to 2 half flights, semi-flights. Federica mentioned that these are all terroir wines, where a lot of attention that is devoted to grapes, where the winemaker is stepping back so that the product is always consistent year in, year out, non-vintage wines have the goal of being the same every year. But this is not the case with the wines we're about to taste. I'm very pleased with the new vintages of Masottina. People who know me know that I always speak what I think. So here I have a group of wines that have specific characteristics that have an independent variable in common. And I would like that during the tasting we would think of wine style. When it comes to Prosecco, there's a residual sugar, which is obviously very important, and traditionally people say that the extra dry Proseccos, that is the Proseccos that have a residual sugar between 12 and 17 grams per liter, are the traditional ones, slightly sweet. And the Brut, the share of Bruts, also based on the little residual sugar that is certified at this point, it could be in a category below Brut. But reasons of commercial recognition, companies call these names, call these wines Brut, is a category that spans from 0 to 12. Now, Prosecco is often referred to as if it had been invented day before yesterday, but Prosecco has always existed. I suggest that we don't refer to Pliny the Elder and the old writers of the Roman times who wrote about agriculture, but it's important to refer to this very long history in this case. The wife of the emperor, Empress Livia, was a woman who seemed to live longer than everybody else by virtue of the Puccinum wine. A famous physician, Galen, in 100 AD, suggested Prosecco, aka Puccinum, as the wine of long life, like some sort of panacea. The territory of Prosecco has existed as such for a very long time. That is the gist of it. There are a few interesting documents. The charter of the city speak about that describe the local viticulture that had been in place for some time. For instance, it was forbidden to irrigate in the area of Prosecco, and that there were very high fines for people stealing grapes at the harvest season, and that you could just walk around with your dogs in the vineyards during the harvest time. And then in the 1600s, they started talking about the vineyards of Prosecco. By the mid-18th century, from an ampelographic point of view, the name was first used for the varietal, to designate the varietal. We have to wait until the 19th century, by the time where Italy was united, when in Conegliano, a few years after the unity of Italy, the first bottle of Prosecco was bottled 1860, and the first school of winemaking in Italy. And that is essential, that is fundamental. Federico's father, his grandfather are all exemplify the generations that already existed in this area, and they already had a school of winemaking in the late 19th century. In Italy, up until the 1980s, people didn't even know what malolactic fermentation was. So in a terroir where you have a community that can access, that cannot only utilize on history, also on the first school of winemaking in Italy, implies that in that area you know how to make wine and have known it for decades. Now, Martinotti was an engineer who invented the Sharma method. He was born in 1895. And then Mr. Sharma patented his methodology, and the methodology took his name. But in Conegliano, they were using what was then called the Sharma method, and they had been using it 30 years before it was recognized globally. Now, we call it Metodo Italiano, which was then modified at the School of Winemaking, the Enological School, because Martinotti would tend to use a longer Sharma method, at least 6 months in the pressure tanks. To us, the minimum is 20 days because the grapes, which back then were called Prosecco, now are called Glera, because the characteristics that had been researched into the winemaking school, especially by Mr. Carpenet, had understood that 6 months were not needed to bring out the very best of the grapes in question, but that the fermentation had to be short. And so in our area we call it the modified Metodo Italiano. This is all very interesting. As you can tell, this is an interregional designation. In the 1930s, the consortia were formed. In the 1960s and 70s, the DOCs were created. Initially, only a few million bottles were made here. Just imagine, like Federico's, a winery making red and white wines, and partly are still with the casks and the storage and aging areas for whites and reds. Then all of a sudden, everything changed in 2009 because this DOC, which exists across 9 provinces, in 81% of the cases, Prosecco is made in Venice, Treviso, Conegliano, in the Venetian area. 81% of it. The rest is made the balance is made in Udine, Gorizia, and Trieste, so in Friuli. Now, look at the pyramid. The pyramid represents quite faithfully, also from a standpoint, the breakdown. The base is the Prosecco DOC. How do you differentiate it from the rest? Well, the key is that they make 24,000. They use 24,000 hectares of soil, and the yield per hectare is pretty generous, 180 quintals or 18 tons per hectare. That is the broadest area. Then you also, and that also includes the ISO area. Then you have Asolo with 7 million bottles, and the yields start going down. 135, so they go down from 180 to 135 quintals per hectare. And then you have a Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG, 8,000 hectares, 100 million bottles approximately. And then we go further up to Rive. Rive means the hills. 43 Rive, 207 hectares under vines, and approximately 2 million bottles. And then last but not least, 107 hectares of Cartizze, where you make no longer 135 quintals per hectare, but the yields go down to 120 quintals per hectare, or 12 tons per hectare. Now, I'm going to leave the floor to Cristina while adding 2 pieces of information. First of all, that you have Prosecco, the raspberry, which is one biotype, and on the other hand, you have the Prosecco Lungo di Allungate, that contains more sugar and more acidity. There are 5 clones for the round-berried, 14 for the elongated berry biotype. Now, when you taste the Proseccos, you'll realize how different the 2 bunches may be, and the ages of the vines are also making a big difference. And last but not least, but this will be discussed later, Rive is rather special because
diciamo, sulle colline. Sapete che quando i ghiacciai
the Rive are on the hillsides that resulted from the meltdown of glaciers. And this meltdown created some sort of bowl of amphitheaters. It is on the hills that surround the amphitheater that the vineyards of Masottina are located. These are single vineyards. In the world of Prosecco, it's not so easy to come across vintage wines and single vineyard wines, and so that's pretty unique about you. And also you have vineyards that are exposed to the east and to the west, so sunrise hit and sunset hit. Let's see if we can make a distinction by these wines. Now, all the numbers are needed to translate into logical consequences in our glasses because we're going to blind taste them. So we'll be trying to understand from the evidence that comes out of the glass to understand what happens upstream of the glass. If it's DOC, DOCG, Prosecco, a standard Prosecco, or a Rive. So it's going to be a challenge. So we'll decide who gets the better flight between me and him. Probably I will. Okay, when talking about the elements that influence the style of wines, Prosecco and Prosecco DOCG, well, we needed to start from the terroir. So we've been talking about figures and sizes. We needed to also discuss elevation. So we know that the DOC wines are made from grapes that grow in the flatlands or lows, while the DOCG area has much higher gradients, close to 70%, and these slopes are protected by the UNESCO. They're part of the World Heritage List. So the elevation also involves a higher daytime-nighttime differential. So the production of aromatics is more intense, especially during the day, while during the night the ripening slow down, so the acidity is more vibrant as a result than the grapes that grow in the lowlands. And also there are more breezes that will dry up the bunches, and so there's more concentration, and also the slope improves the quality of light that hits the. And also the DOCG also tends to have a variety of exposures. So when you taste what you expect from a DOC and DOCG will change in terms of the different parameters. A more impactful, a more aggressive wine on the nose that will then expand palate and then disappear quickly from the DOCs, while the texture will be better structured with a higher stratification to the palate, tending versus a more and reserved bouquet. Consider also the DOCG an assembled blend of different plots. The DOCs are centered around the area of hence the importance of the soil. If you look at the area of the Valdobbiadene and Conegliano, the soils are somewhat more fertile, richer in clay. Their pH is different compared to the soils of Conegliano. What does that translate into in the glass? Well, the Valdobbiadene wines have a more open, straightforward and floral bouquet. The other wines grow on drier soils, deeper seated and leaner. So there's more acidity, while this is shyer. So the Conegliano wine is more palate-like wines, more gastronomic, thicker to the palate, and less immediate, less straightforward to the nose. Now, when we talk about the river, it will be interesting to look at expressions, sunrise and sunset. So the east-facing vineyards will have a much lusher structure and a more light body. Sorry, she just got mixed up. Okay. So again, she's rephrasing it. The one that face west have more maturity in the fruit, while the east face vineyards are more dynamic. The vine series to be pretty old, 50 to 60 years old, with deeper roots on nutrients that will feed scantier fruit, because older vines tend to be less productive. All these factors should come out, should stand out more clearly from the glass, so you know what to expect. And then you'll also have to come up with a trend, and we'll also discuss finally awards that were granted to these wines. And it will be interesting for you to find out which were the best recognized glasses. The second question is, which one is your favorite? And the third question will be, what is the stricter rule book for that will hold a few surprises. Are you ready to start? Yes.
Yes, I'm ready. So all kinds of different clones. It's very interesting to taste these wines, but let me propose something to you. Given that we decided the order, this is a challenge indeed. I'd like to change things a little. So given that you've already been served, let's number two.
Stanno facendo la roba per conto loro.
Allora, Filippo, che cosa facciamo? What we can do, rather,
prima di passare a bere, sarei molto felice di salutare i nostri amici che sono connessi con noi, quindi saluto da parte di Milano, Masottina, Sabina, che è la nostra
Sabina,
eccoli qua, e ovviamente gli amici collegati sia a Hong Kong che a Shenzhen. Un grandissimo saluto e buona degustazione.
Saluti da Milano.
Enjoy the tasting. All our greetings from Milan.
Ti ripasso la parola.
Grazie per questo. Vedi, ci sta provando. Mi ha interrotto.
Ma lo farò anche.
She's doing it on she's interrupting me.
Allora, scherzi a parte, partiamo con il vino numero 2.
Let's start with wine number 2.
Poi vi dirò perché.
I'll tell you why in a
Prevalentemente perché.
Well, let's say. Basically.
Allora, questo è un vino, innanzitutto, ha una complessità aromatica.
Wine quite a complex aromatics from the very beginning.
Se mettete il naso dentro questo
If you
vino
just
e ad occhi chiusi con un attimo di attenzione,
and you keep your eyes closed, or you can lead I prefer, but anyway, if you pay attention to that moment, to that specific moment,
a questo vino, la cosa che emerge più interessante ancora prima di assaggiarlo è il fatto che non è soltanto fruttato, d'accordo, che c'è
here, flower hints, grapefruit, very gentle grapefruit.
Un po' esotica.
Big element here due to
emerge
intenso, but actually
un paio di cose. Uno è un lato balsamico del vino. Cosa significa? Che balsamico è un termine generale che
balsamic side wine, which
diciamo catene aromatiche principali.
La glera from the main aromatic chains. Glera, indeed, glera grapes develops lots of this. Here we got vanilla, for instance. Yesterday, in New York, London, but in wine number 2 or in number 4, is there some wood, some oak? Well, be reassured, these wines do not present any oak element. This is Glera. So what you can perceive here is a sort of light mint note, mild
che
note,
emerge
mint
molto intensa, molto forte, assieme al tocco di glicine reale e alla parte fruttata.
Clearly together with the fruity part of the flowery content, namely wisteria.
Noi chiamiamo
and
il
here
lapis.
we have to also mention the so-called
il lapis, però dal latino ematite, no?
graphite, the graphite element that are used, to produce pencils. Now, when we used to eat graphite, well, you did graphite. I didn't. Well, it is true. I used to eat everything. It is true. I eat and drink everything. I still
si possa
like
trascorrere un po'
the
di
fact
tempo al
some
naso di questo
spend
vino, perché troppo spesso
some time
tutti pensano che
appreciating
il
the
Prosecco
bouquet
è
of this wine,
la
because
industria
of course
dell'intrattenimento,
we
lo si
know
beve
that
senza
the Prosecco
pensarci.
is an
Ma
entertainment
va bene
wine. We
sia
drink
così.
it without
Ma
thinking
oggi
about
abbiamo
it, and
questo
that's
piccolo
fine. But
spazio,
today
prendiamocelo.
we want to devote a special
Questa nota
moment
lieve
to
di
Prosecco
pietrafocaia, un
tasting.
po'
And
minerale,
so
bocca
you
di
can
vino.
actually see this mineral note at the start.
È quell'ora del giorno in
Flintstone,
cui si può
and
bere il
it's the moment of the
prosecco.
day.
Generalmente si dice la
This is the
sera.
right moment of the day for Prosecco.
le
Well,
10.
the morning is
Ma
fine, it's the right
cosa
moment.
succede?
Anyway,
Guardate, allora, si sta ancora
you see,
chiudendo
what's
tanto,
happening?
no? Cioè, questo è un prosecco
This
che ha struttura,
is a Prosecco wine which is
molta
structured.
intensità, tanta
It is
profondità.
very intense,
Questa
very
nota che io
deep.
dicevo di in bocca continua a
It
rimanere
proposes a
intensa e
graphite
va
note
avanti
that
a
persists
lungo.
in the palate.
C'è una
and
nota lievemente
long,
sapida, non è
and actually
soltanto
there's
l'acidità
a
del
slightly
vino a
sapid
giocare un
note, so
ruolo,
it's
ma a
not
metà
just
palato il vino
acidity, it's not
lascia
just a matter of
questa
acidity, but at a certain
traccia
point in the
di
palate you start
mento, di
feeling this
pietrafocaia,
sort of
che io
trace of
trovo
myrrh or
abbastanza
flintstone,
inusuale trovare in
which
un
is
prosecco. È molto
quite unusual
teso,
for a
c'ha
Prosecco.
una struttura
It is
quasi con delle note
very
di
structured.
catechina, di
It has,
tannino. È un vino
it has got
che
some catechin and tannin
io
notes.
trovo che in una degustazione
I would
che non
say
sarebbe
that
così facile
in
con
a
altri
blind
spumanti.
taste it wouldn't be
Non
so
sarebbe così
easy
facile identificarlo come
identify
prosecco,
it
perché
just
è un
with
po'
other
più austero
sparkling wines,
rispetto agli
because this
altri.
Prosecco is a little more austere
State
compared
ovviamente
to
capendo
other. Of course,
abbastanza
you might
come dire,
have understood
coinvolto
that I
da
feel
questa
quite
ipotesi di
by
prosecco,
this
probabilmente
proposal
un'ipotesi un po' più
for this Prosecco.
contemporanea, un po' più
Probably this is a
moderna.
more modern,
Pensatelo
more
ad esempio a
contemporary type of
pasti seduti a
Prosecco.
tavola,
Just
questa è
imagine
una
that you are
bottiglia
tasting, you're having
poco
lunch, you
residuo
are there
zuccherino
at your
che la
table,
in grande
and you
gioia
can easily
con un
drink
bello
this bottle of
spaghetto
Prosecco with
all'astice
quite a
con
limited
qualche o
residual
un
sugar,
gambero
with
crudo per
some
esempio. Io sentirei
spaghetti
abbastanza
with
felice
lobster
di
or
assaggiare questo vino. Adesso passiamo al numero
roasted fish. I would
1,
very
vino
happy
numero
to
1. Quindi il
wine
numero
with that
2
fruit. Now let's move
sono
to
partito da quello perché ho
one,
notato
which is actually
che
number one.
partendo dagli
So I wanted to
altri
start
la
from number one because I noticed that if
tensione
I had started from the
d'austerità in
others,
qualche modo
probably we
risultava
wouldn't
eccessiva dopo gli
attend
altri. Passiamo al vino
the
numero
right attention to
Vino
its
numero 1, di
austerity
nuovo lo
note.
stecco di
So
vaniglia.
wine number one,
C'è una parte
again,
però di
vanilla,
esotico molto più
but with
importante
a
qua. È più il frutto della passione,
present
l'ananas.
exotic content, passion
C'è come se
fruit,
ci fosse una
pamplemousse. So
maturità
there's
in
a sort
più e una
of
componente
it's slightly more ripe, and
interessante che ricorda un
there's
po'
also an
il
interesting
mandarino.
here kind of
Quindi
tangerine.
una nota leggermente
So can
verde,
a
il
sort of
mandarancio
greenish
quasi.
note.
Sentite come nel primo caso il vino aveva un'ampiezza
It's more a clementine
determinata,
than a tangerine. So
prevalentemente
in case
da questo aspetto,
the first
diciamo,
one we
di
tasted actually
profondità,
was characterized by a quite
salina
a
e di
wide
tocco
amplitude,
al palato
characterized
abbastanza
by
intenso.
sapidity.
C'ha un
Here
elemento di viscosità
we
che arriva
can
immediatamente.
certainly appreciate
Chiaramente
its
l'attacco più
juiciness,
dolce dell'altro
and
vino,
actually
quindi è un po'
at
più
the beginning it's
immediato,
slightly
e però
sweeter than the previous
nonostante
one.
tutto lascia una bella pulizia
it,
in bocca. È
it
un
leaves
vino
us
che se la gioca più
a
sul
feeling
frutto
of
maturo, su questa
cleanness in our
dolcezza
mouth.
lieve
So
sul
the
che
fruits
di
here
nuovo
are
a me
more
ricorda
ripe, and
un
there's a
po'
slightly more
una
sweeter
bella
finish, and that
colazione in
makes me
Sicilia,
think of a
bel
nice
morosa, con un po' di
breakfast I could have in Sicily
questo profumo
with
di
some pink
zagara, no? Cioè,
pamplemousse,
molto fresco,
with
molto intuitivo.
something
Ma
nice
noi
to
i
eat
balletti
with,
dobbiamo farcelo,
and
però
so
alla fine. Vino
it's a
numero
very
3.
fresh and very intuitive type
Vino
of
numero
wine.
3.
Okay, let's now move to wine number 3.
Allora, in questo caso ritrovo
So,
alcune note
here
un po' più sulla
we
salvia stavolta, cioè si va
can find
a toccare
some
delle note più di un giardino
notes.
mediterraneo,
We can
anche,
have a Mediterranean orchard, an
del
art
fiore
garden,
rosmarino,
rosemary
quasi qualche
flower.
cosa, sempre queste note un po' più verdi
Again,
che
there's
ricordano
a
anche
sort of
l'alloro,
more
la
greenish notes that makes me think of a bay, some
no,
bay leaves just before
no,
you detach them from a branch. So,
sto parlando
why
di questa
am
roba
I telling you
e non
this?
soltanto perché è vero
Things.
che come sempre c'è la
Because,
nota di
of
glicine,
course,
di fiori
again, we
d'acacia,
have a
no?
wisteria
Cioè,
note
tutta quella roba che troviamo
or acacia flowers, nectarine, peach. But anyway, it's quite maybe a bit more difficult to identify the other elements. Slightly mental.
Beh, la mousse sembra essere più generosa. L'attacco
Now, the mousse seems to be more generous. Skin is extremely sweet, and the finish reminds me of licorice.
In questo caso la nota citrica e agrumata
Icicle. And so in this case, citrus note is much based on essential oils which are often released by the skin, but actually it's more focused onto the smell, the taste of the fruit. And so a lemon icicle in the summer, so a wider type of a more ample mousse. And now I would say that I would like to give the floor to my colleague so that she can propose her free wine. Well, your proposals are quite good. Let's see mine now. So we've listened to this wonderful wines. Indeed, they're characterized by a sort of gastronomic style. Let's now move to my proposals. So all the wines have been served, so we can compare the two. So let's take all three of them. Let's smell them one after the other, 4, 5, and 6. So, number 4 to the appears quite important, but number 5 seems more impactful, whereas number 6 it's certainly shyer.
Allora, il calice numero 4 rivela
wine number 4 shows some very well-defined notes, because here we are quite a shy type of wine, but still very well-defined as for fruits are concerned. What can we say about wine number 5?
Qualcosa di verde, qualcosa di giallo.
Number 5, perhaps. Lemongrass, citrus, but also there's a sort of like, I don't know, white peppers or spices, and here sage. So this is probably the blend of several varietals. What do you think?
Okay.
Am I right in assuming so? Okay, let's now take wine number 5. That was indeed number 4. Let's move to number 5. How can we define this? This is perhaps younger, more fun, fresher. I guess that all adjectives could go. So in this glass, we can certainly appreciate a more exotic note, still based on citrus, but we can perceive a more passion fruit here. So let's say that it becomes easier to drink this wine. It's certainly more approachable. And now let's move to the last glass of wine, number 6. In this case, I would use the adjective deep, assertive, austere, with vaguely smoky notes. And this is a very fine note, and so this is a wine that we have to long for, and when we start tasting it, probably we'll experience a wide stratification. And if you remember at the beginning, maybe you have already guessed what kind of wine this is. So let's now taste wine number 4.
Allora, la prima domanda che vi faccio è:
and my first question to you is,
questo vino è un vino che è simile ai precedenti?
Is this a wine similar to the previous ones, or is it totally different? Has it got something in common with one of the first 3 you tasted, or has it got nothing to do with them?
Ok, quindi ha qualcosa di simile con i precedenti, però magari
it has got something similar to some of the ones, but it is more or less thick. Okay, fine. Indeed, there is a common thread here. Indeed, this is a different version of a wine you've tasted before. So we will find out later the magic of a wine-making option to the end of determining the quality and the style of a wine. So how could change depending on how it is treated. And so in this case, I would expect some good vibrations, a good level of density in the mouth. Your mouth at the palate, it expands itself and it remains there. So it's quite a spheric type of wine. Now let's compare it to wine number 5.
Vino numero 5.
I would define this wine as the vibration wine. It's a very entertaining type of wine. At the beginning, it's quite thin, then it widens up, and then it fades away, but in a very clean and smooth manner. And actually, you feel like drinking more. This is a kind of entertainment wine. When you're tired in the evening, this is the right one for us. On your sofa, stop thinking and enjoy a glass of wine on this one. So, do you think that this is better quality or lower quality compared to the previous wine? I would say it is a lower quality. Who would say it's higher quality? Well, let's say that the majority of you thinks that this is lower quality. Fine, but anyway, it's quite a fun type of wine, correct? Okay. I like you. You're very good tasters. And now, to number 6. Let's taste it.
Questo lo voglio definire il vino della profondità.
I say that this is a deep wine. I mean, the previous wine, actually, at the beginning it was quite thin, it widened up, and then it faded away. This, instead, in the palate remains there, thick, dense, a bit nervous, and then it gradually fades away. So this is extremely deep and refined type of wine. We all sense that to the nose, and we said this is a bit shyer, whereas at the palate it appears deeper, more dense, more nervous. It's quite an interesting wine. So how about the residual sugar of this wine? Is it less than 6, more than 6, up to 12, or up to 17? Three options. Below 6, from 6 to 12, and up to 17. How many would go? Option number 2, 6, 12. Option number 3, so even a richer residual sugar. So we all agree on the lower than 12. So residual sugar is below 12, according to most of you. But now I will propose to you quite a fun exercise. Let's try to separate the perception of acidity from the separation of fruit and sugar. And in this case, see that actually acidity is very sharp, but actually compared to the previous one, it's certainly more right. It involves and it offers a perfect balance with the sugar, with the residual sugar after the second fermentation. So, indeed, we just the 3 types of wines that represent the identity and history of Masottina. There could be something memorable and iconic in these wines. We'll say more about this one, we'll discover their identities. And I'd like to play now a little bit with our tasting, because indeed we've tasted all 6 of them, yes. So let's play a game together. Now, which is your favorite out of these 6? Go for wine number 1. According to you, this is the best wine. Number 1, I have my personal opinion, but I want to know what. So who would go for wine number 1? The best wine for you? Nobody. Number 2.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 e penso anche
5 of you, or maybe 6. 6 with you.
me l'aveva detto prima quale mi piaceva.
It is your favorite indeed. Okay, so 6.
Vino numero 3. Chi è il
Wine number 3.
Chi ama di più il vino numero 3?
Who prefers number 3?
4.
4 people.
Poi il vino numero
Next,
4.
wine number 4.
Che il vino numero 4 sia non che sia il migliore, ma il più buono, quello che
Who would have said
verrebbe
this is the wine that he or she prefers?
1.
You would like to drink 4 liters of that. 3 of you.
3. E poi Chi invece pensa che il vino
And who now
ritiene che anzi il vino numero 5 sia il più buono?
deems that wine number 5 is actually your preferred one, the most pleasant one you've tasted this morning?
E chi vota infine il numero 6?
And who will go for number 6?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 con me.
6 with me. This is my favorite. My score, correct? Can I go to her? So what was your favorite indeed? Well, I have to choose one of yours, of course. Why? Why? This is a challenge.
No, allora,
It would be too easy to choose one of mine. Anyway, in tasting all these wines together, I
stimolo che getterei per la sala è ma
another
c'è
possible
tra queste due squadre un
reflection could be
elemento-
this: is there? I mean, what is the independent variable in these two ranges?
No, allora, tutto glera.
The blend? No, it's all. So the answer was
Quale può essere la
the answer proposed was the blend. So I mean, the first three wines, what do they have in common? They have in common.
Come? Sì?
Unfortunately, we cannot translate if we don't use the microphone. We do apologize for that.
Sì.
Ecco, a proposito la domanda sorge
Well,
spontanea.
indeed,
Secondo
I have a
voi,
question about this.
proviamo anche qui a chiedere per alzata di mano se uno è brutto o un extra dry. Che ne
Please
pensi?
raise your hand if you think that a brut wine or an extra dry one. So how do you mean? You mean I'm
No, nel senso il vino numero 1 secondo
well?
voi era un
Number one, for instance, was it wine or extra dry?
Chi dice brutto?
Who's brut?
Bene, siamo tutti per il brutto.
Okay, we all use brut. Number two, brut or extra dry? How many would say brut?
Chi vota l'extra dry?
How many would say extra dry?
Mezzo e mezzo, però siamo più sul brutto.
Quite divided on this, but there are more people who would go for a brut. Number three,
Uno.
brut.
Ok.
E quindi tutti pensano che sia un extra dry?
So the rest of you think it's dry? Yes. Okay. So number four, brut or extra dry?
Per il brutto?
Brut,
Chi vota dry?
extra dry. There was one brut. Okay. More people think it's extra dry. Number five,
Pensa che sia un brutto.
brut,
Extra dry per tutti.
extra dry to all of
E
you.
infine il 6.
And number six,
Extra dry tutta la vita, vero?
extra dry for all of you. Fine.
Sì, ragazzi, dai.
They're quite good.
Già, perché lui vale doppio.
All comments should be made by using the microphone.
Lui rimane lì
Federico
a
dice
difendere
ancora
la-
numero 2. Già, perché non abbiamo chiesto qual è
Number two, you
invece a
said,
livello
well, indeed, we have another
qualitativo
question. According to the specifications,
possiamo fare
what is the one that you think is the best quality wine? Well, at this point,
man mano che procediamo
I would say that the time has come to reveal identities.
È evidente che c'era un, come dire, per fare come avevo anticipato,
Now,
le degustazioni
as I
hanno
said
un
at the
senso
beginning,
quando c'è un tema,
to have a
no?
tasting,
In
I mean,
mezzo,
it
per
makes
cui si
sense to have
cerca
a
di
tasting.
capire,
When there's a theme,
se c'è corrispondenza
an
con
underlying
il
theme, in order to understand whether actually correspondence between the wines we are tasting and a sort of independent variable. In this case, we certainly started with the designations, 108 hectares for the DOC, so I would expect a less territory-related wine, a type of wine with a less important character. And if we move to the DOCG, we would expect greater quality. Another key variable in the Prosecco world has to do with residual sugar. In this case, actually with the residual sugar content. So number one, was it DOC or DOCG or Rive?
DOC?
DOC?
Ma siete bravissimi, ragazzi.
Oh yeah,
Questo
great.
è il Cal Maggiore.
You are
Brut.
great. This is Cal Maggiore Brut.
Effettivamente, anche se è una DOC,
And
non so se
indeed,
avete notato, ma
DOC wine, but I don't know if you noticed, but anyway, it's quite a gastronomic wine. It's quite interesting. We listened to Filippo's description, and this is quite a rich wine.
mentre svegliamo il secondo vino,
Let's now
vedete
wine, that,
Rive
and this is Rive d'Ogliano. R.D.O stands for Rive di Ogliano. So between Conegliano and Vittorio Veneto, where there's a east wind coming from the tree. At 50 kilometers you have Masottina, at 50 kilometers you can go and have a swim in Venice. Now these two wines together with the third one, we reference to numbers. The first one had a residual sugar of 0.6. 4.8 is the residual sugar of the second one. Wine number 2 was certainly, technically speaking, the drier one of all the 6 wines, and certainly one of the most appreciated, because your wine number 2, so R.D.O, actually got 6 points, namely the same scores I got with my wine number 6. And I'll tell you what it is later on. Exactly. And so in this case, we are moving towards a more specific idea of a type of Prosecco. And as for the acidity is concerned, between gram liter and pH, well, on average, we refer to gram liter 5.5% for all bottles, 5.4, 5.6. As for pH, pH is always very low. When very clearly expressed her opinion about this sort of creamy acidity, well, it's due from this pH 3.10. This is a pH that could be the pH of a Riesling wine, so it's an extremely saliva-producing wine. So DOC, R.D.O, and then all Brut wines. DOCG Brut, yes, indeed. My range of my wines were all Brut wines. Number 4, DOC or DOCG or Rive? What do you think? Someone says Rive? Rive? How about the others? DOC, how many would go for a DOC wine? 2 of you. DOCG? 3, 4, 5. You're excellent tasters indeed. This is a DOCG Calagranda, extra dry, 15 grams. And this is, as we said before, an assembly of different varietals. This is why we could actually experience these expressivity between cedric, herbaceous, grassy, and a thickness then to the palate. So it's a good example of DOCG. Number 5, 15.1 for sugar content. And the fifth one, the fun one, what is it? DOC, DOCG or Rive? DOC. Many would say DOC. Oh, almost all of you. Okay, okay, excellent, excellent tasters. Thank you. This is Calmaggiore, here again, extra dry, and this is probably one of the best sellers because it's a very typical type of Prosecco. It talks about its territorial identity.
We're now finishing off with the masterpiece that you all appreciated.
Il Levante Extra Dry.
The Levante Extra Dry, it really is a masterpiece. What do you think?
Tutti e due gli ultimi vini sono 13-14 di grammo litro, per cui tutti i vini di Cristina avevano una...
So all the wines
siamo proprio nel mondo dell'extra dry.
Cristina
E nonostante questo però
were extra dried. In Christina's flight, all the wines were extra dry. They were very juicy, and there's a lot of tautness and balance in them. So time flies. So before we move on to the last 2 glasses, did you have a question for Federico, maybe? Well, yes, I'm curious. I have a couple of questions that come to mind. Question, which he's already confessed, is what's your favorite wine? I know it's hard for a producer, but you picked a wine that is drier and more than the others. Is that a tendency, a trend for a Masottina or for the Prosecco? Well, it's both. It's a trend as well as a trend for Masottina. The fact that We have started to produce the R.D.O. from 2013 from a young vineyard, and that we've always done that at 6 grams. Passing of time, the vineyard, and especially this harvest year, which is the first, made it possible to drive down the sugar level to 4, because the conditions of the vineyard allow for that. And thinking of this as the terroir collection, where we're looking for more identity, we've decided to increase it. I've been Brut-like.
Posso dire che sono
What about your father?
un integralista delle rive.
Well, I'm a bit of an integralist. I only love the Rive. That's my utmost expression. That is the journalist's game. Pelé, Maradona, and the best, and to me the Rive are the very best. What about the other two? I keep saying is good and better. So superiore is better and Rive is the very best. It's George Best. I'm a really realist. We started with the first vintage in 2009 because the vineyard, well, we had that vineyard at our disposal. And then in 2013, the Brut version was first made because we bought it. We bought the new vineyard facing west, because these are the two expressions of Ogliano. That's a very interesting, a very tempting opportunity. It's 2.5 hectares, isn't it? Yes, it's 2 plots, as they say in English. Parcels. 2 vineyards of 2.5 to 3 hectares. So an opportunity to understand the terroir and understand the potential of Glera, what it can give at its best. Okay. I would like to also underscore this. Think of the last wine.
Dov'è? Quindi è a est.
Where is it located? It's facing east, so it gets sunrise light. So in the wine world, apparently the best quality of sunlight is the quality of the sunlight that impinges on the at sunset. Our vineyard has a gradient, but not an extreme one, unlike what we have in Rolle or towards Valdobbiadene. It is enclosed on 3 sides by lines of hedges and trees. The soil is special because it was originally morainic, and therefore it originated from the Alpine glaciers, but because it is facing east and it's an old vine, it should not express the utmost quality it should express. Well, the top quality should come from the vineyards that are hit by midday sunlight, so south to southeast. And what is the role of climate change? Well, in the coming years, there will be increasingly evident on a vintage year like this one that was very dry. Certainly, east-facing vineyards were not so severely impacted by droughts. But if you think of it, this is the result of some sort of counterculture, because it has demonstrated and that since 2009 that a wine like this can counterintuitively receive many awards. It was in the top 100 in 2021, 97 points from Decanter. It was for 2 years in a row the best Prosecco for Decanter, the first Rive, top 100 of Wine Spectator, and then it won many other awards. But also because I didn't study enology, I'm part of the counterculture as well. So it was a very pleasant surprise to find out that this wine could meet so well the taste and the requirements of our clientele, and that proved true here again. We've seen that the taste and the characteristics were very much appreciated and enjoyed, and this was a consensual conclusion for many different countries and many different cultures. It's nice to think that, thinking of where it comes from.
Così. La prima cosa, intanto ti passo il tuo...
Lascialo qua.
È la prima cosa che quando andai in vigna ad
Well,
assaggiare
that
roba,
was the
soprattutto poi
first thing that I noticed when I went into the vineyards and I tasted the wines.
hai già spiegato.
This is the first thing that really caught my attention. Now, the last one,
Già messo il naso dentro.
I don't know if you've
Sono
already
molto abbastanza diversi rispetto a ciò che abbiamo
cleared
assaggiato
them.
fino
They're
adesso.
pretty different from what we've been tasting so
Abbiamo
far.
a sinistra il numero
On the
7,
left
a
side, you
destra
have
il
number
numero
7, and
8.
on the right-hand side, you
7,
have number
numero
8. 7
magico,
is a
creativo
magical
per gli
number, the number of
alchemici e per i
creativity to
pitagorici,
alchemists
e qui mi aspetto di
and
trovare
Pythagoreans.
Il più buono secondo loro.
e l'8, vabbè, però l'8 è il numero
And
dell'infinito.
then number
Vediamo un
8
po'
is the
che cosa
number of
abbiamo sotto mano.
infinity.
Intanto ritornano i profumi, in questi
So,
in entrambi i casi devo dire,
The root, the bouquet with the balsamic notes, with hints of notes of woodiness and pine resin, while no oak was used to make it, and ripe fruit. In this case, you have this extraordinary nuance of ripe yellow melons. And again, the pineapple and fruit is back in this wine.
Palato bello, citrico,
To the palate,
fresco,
it is
è più
beautiful,
l'anesto
citric,
in questo
fresh,
caso, quasi
and
il
in this
tannino
case,
dell'anesto,
medlars,
la
the
acidità
tannins and
della
acidity
fruttività,
of
guardate,
medlars and the juiciness.
fatica a parlare, qui c'è una
I'm having a hard
succo, una
time
freschezza
speaking because my
straordinaria,
mouth is
l'acidità, quella
watering.
relazione
And
pH
so
e
again,
grammo
the
litro di acidità che
pH and
restituisce
grams
al
per
vino, no?
liter of
Grammo
acidity
di
are
lo zucchero
imparting
non è
this wine its
tantissimo in questo
acidity again.
caso,
The sugar
no? Però
is
c'è una
not too
dolcezza
perceptible
che
in
il
this
punto di
case,
domanda è da dove
but
viene.
there's a sweetness in it anyway. Where does it come
Il
from?
mio.
Tina, your wine now.
Allora, è simile al precedente,
Well, it is
ma
similar to the previous spot.
ovviamente qui qual è il gioco?
Obviously here,
Forse l'avete un po' scoperto.
I think you've
se
found
questi
out
hanno Prosecco
what's
Masottina, che
at
cosa avranno di
stake here.
diverso? Perché ve
If
l'abbiamo messi
these
alla
are
cieca?
all
Cosa
Prosecco
potrebbero
Masottina,
avere di
why
più
are they
o di
blind?
meno rispetto ai
What could
precedenti?
they have
Cosa
more or
notate?
less
Cosa
than the
cambia?
previous wines? In addition
C'è
or
solo
in
l'evoluzione,
subtraction compared to
esatto.
the wines?
Quindi il
It's their
gioco che faremo
evolution. So
insieme è
the
capire
game we'll be playing
quale
together is
annata vi abbiamo
understanding
messo in
what
degustazione.
vintages we're
La facciamo
tasting.
semplice, buoni. Vi
Let's
spiego
keep
come
this
funziona.
simple. I'll tell
Ho
you
diviso,
how this works.
cluster i
For three
livelli di maturità e ho
clusters,
voluto chiamare il vino dello
I
slancio i vini
broke
che hanno
down
da
the
1
clusters
a 3
into
anni, quindi
maturity.
2021, 20
So
e 19.
the
Vini
three
di
vintages
slancio.
are
Poi
21,
ho voluto
20
fare un
and
secondo
19 in
cluster
that cluster.
chiamandolo
The
vini
second
della
cluster
ricchezza
is the
sgargiante
wines
e ho
of
fatto i vini da
lives, so the
4 a
wines
6 anni,
that were
quindi
4 to 6 years,
2018, 17
2018,
e 16.
17 and 16.
E poi
Then
i vini dell'ansia, della
cluster
maturità, che sono i
wines
vini
of
che vanno
grace
dal
and maturity
2015 indietro.
2015
Noi abbiamo
and
assaggiato
back.
anche annate vecchie, siamo arrivati fino al 2010 e abbiamo trovato veramente
So we've
grande
tasted vintages
potenza,
all the way
grande
to
struttura
2020,
e
and we
molta,
found
molta
them to be
eleganza.
very
Beh, la 10
powerful,
tra
momentous, and
l'altro,
well structured,
del
of
caso
elegance
succede con i vini
was
quando li
the
assaggiamo rispetto alle annate successive
Now,
è molto più fresca, per esempio
the
della 14, della 16,
wines were a
17.
lot
L'unico
fresher
problema
than
è che
14,
non c'è più
16, and
bottiglie. Già quelle
17
poche che ci sono rimaste
that
sono state,
were from the
Cristina,
vintage year
una
2012 and 14. There are not
in
many
casa
bottles
fatta
left,
da Federico,
and
perché suo
the few
padre
bottles
ovviamente
were
la vecchia
stolen by
cultura,
Federico,
diciamo,
and his father didn't even know.
Prosecco delle
He
bollicine
brought
si
them
deve
to
vendere
this
tutto, soprattutto perché la scuola enologica diceva il
to this
Prosecco subito dentro
and
l'acqua.
because the old school also thought that a Prosecco is good right away. So his father didn't even know he had set aside a few for the tastings.
Diciamo, dal fatturato, ma anche lasciare in
So
casa la roba.
Prosecco is believed by the old generation to be ready for drinking immediately and needs to be sold entirely. but you set aside a few bottles against your father's.
No, in realtà io vedevo mio padre che
Yes, we also produce reds and whites, still whites. And I know my father was setting aside his best selections. And because I was not involved in knowledge in my studies, I studied law, I did not understand why I was not doing the selections, the results of the Prosecco. So I asked him the questions. He answered to me that Prosecco needs to be sold, all of it, and what? And if possible, during the very same year.
Non è che decidiamo di fare l'imbottigliamento per tutta la produzione
So we
annuale.
can't decide to bottle the entire annual production. This is a very nice way to do things. In Italy, using small pressurized tanks, we will micro-bottle smaller lots of wine so that the wine is always fresh. So people were not accustomed to bottling the wine and then storing it and cellaring it. People would keep the wine in the pressurized tanks. So I started at some point to set aside bottles from the two Rive selections, the first in 2009, and I would hire my father to then taste them what they would because on the market you couldn't even find old vintages of Prosecco, so I didn't know what to expect. So little by little I tasted them to understand the evolution, and at some point I decided to set up my own library of Rive, Masottina's Rive, various vintages, and close to 15 years later, I have a reserve that we are also selling to the consumers and to others who believed in the interest of doing it. Last year we also organized vertical tastings with the press and tradespeople. And some asked the question, but Prosecco was created to be a young wine. I mean, at the same time, why not use opportunities like these where we have the producer and professional tasters to find out about older Proseccos. We're not just saying that Prosecco should be drunk older, but it's interesting to do away with some cognitive biases and stereotypes that exist about Prosecco. So what vintage do you think this one is? Is this part of cluster number 1? Raise your hand if that is the case. Well, both, because they're both from the same vintage year.
2011,
Quindi siamo
2011.
nella grazia.
So it's the vintage and the cluster of
Provate,
grapes.
tanto ormai siamo a conclusione, se vogliamo anche approfittare di questo momento per lasciare spazio appunto alla sala con
A good thing to leave some room for the comments from the audience. And also your remarks. Matteo.
Forse gli possiamo dare il microfono a Matteo. Non è che gli allunghi cortesemente. Prego, Matteo.
Allora, io
Matteo Borré,
volevo confermare quello che tu hai detto.
Yes, I would like to confirm what you said at the beginning. The most recent vintages, I think,
il meglio che io
are really the very best I have taken so far in terms of R.D.Os. I have to be honest about that.
questa svolta di avere anche
So
ridotto leggermente il
the fact of also reducing the residual sugar,
l'aver trovato la formula perfetta.
boils down to the perfect formula. So congratulations, really. And then Federico,
Due cose.
could you please tell us more about two aspects, a couple of aspects that are interesting? Okay, first of all, why did you choose to only use 100% Glera in all of your wines?
Sono un grande appassionato del vostro extra brut.
Then I'm very passionate about your extra brut, which is a DOC, not a
Perché trovo
DOCG.
affascinante
And
che
I
voi
find
portato lo stesso
fascinating that you've made it using the same concept, same philosophy of an R.D.O. in
su misura.
The DOC wines, so like a tailor-made, made-to-measure wine that is so accurate. Can you clarify why you did that?
Sì, qualcuno qui davanti, scusate, vedete un po' di movimento, i tavoli qui davanti hanno ricevuto
Yes,
un
indeed.
8
Here you've just been
tappato
served
e stiamo facendo un cambio
8.
per i tavoli davanti e basta. Quindi se vedete il movimento di un'ulteriore bottiglia che circola è per questo motivo. Prego Federico.
Sì, no, parto dalla seconda. Riguardo il via 20
Actually,
extra
a
brut.
wine has been replaced because
Diciamo
corking.
che fare un extra brut all'interno della DOC Treviso
Having an extra
con i
brut,
terroir della DOC Treviso che sono
wine in the
mediamente
DOC Treviso area
creano
with
vini più
terroir
larghi,
wines that
creano
normally
vini
are,
più ricchi,
ampler, richer.
magari con meno
Certainly
sentori
less,
al naso,
hints to the nose.
però essendo larghi
that
si
they
può
are
azzardare
quite ample,
a farli
we could
con
even
veramente
dare
bassi grammi. Infatti, in effetti,
use very little
è il
grams, and
Masottina
indeed,
con meno grammi in
this is
assoluto,
the
perché ne ha
Masottina
3.
wine with only 3 grams.
Questo ce lo consente la
And
vigna
we can do that
dove iniziò mio nonno,
vine,
a
where
Gorgo al
actually
Monticano.
my
Più o meno
grandfather
Gorgo al
started
Monticano
to work in
a
Conegliano,
metà strada
which
tra
is
Venezia e
halfway
Conegliano,
between
dove
Venice
è il
and
nostro quartier
Conegliano,
generale.
where our headquarters
E
are
questo ce lo
located.
consente quella vigna lì
So we can do
perché quella
that
vigna,
with
che anche
those
quella è un vigneto
vines,
singolo,
because actually that's a single
probabilmente un unicum
vine,
all'interno
probably
dei
a
quasi
unicum
25.000 ettari di Prosecco
in
DOC.
the 25,000 hectares of
Però
DOC Prosecco
ci consente
area.
di farlo perché quella
But we can
vigna
do that
non
because
solo dopo
that
in
specific
sede di
wine,
vinificazione,
not
ma
only
fin
during vinification, but
dall'allevamento
since
la
the
trattiamo
race,
come
treat it as if it
ovvero
were
abbiamo una resa
DOC.
che si
And so
avvicina
we
di
have a
più
yield
a
is
130-135
closer to
quintali ettaro
130,
della DOCG
135 quintals per
che ai
hectare
180 della DOC.
for DOCG, which
Quindi
corresponds to 180 for
stavo a dire, è un
DOC.
investimento, sì certo, è un investimento
That's
perché
certainly, yes, we reduce
produttore
the
deve sempre
production,
stare attento al
but of
profitto.
course producers should always pay
È
attention to his
solo
profit,
quello,
and some
però
producers only
non è
pay
solo
attention to
quello.
that.
Però
To
ovviamente
some, it
fare
is not
che
profit, but of course you have to do your math.
che ci piace fare i ribelli, un po'
And
sognati.
I mean, we
Però
don't want to be,
il fatto di aver
different. Well, a
proposto
little bit,
all'interno della
yes.
Prosecco DOC
But the
un
fact of
extra brut
proposing
è
within the
stato
DOC
abbastanza
Prosecco an extra brut
quando
wine
siamo-
was
quando
quite a
siamo usciti
breakthrough
con l'extra brut.
initiative when we launched it.
Perché si parlava per
Indeed,
la prima
for the very
volta
first time,
del concetto che già nella
we
Conegliano
started to
Valdobbiadene
develop
con
a
le rive, il
concept
Cartizio,
that
era
in the
ampiamente
Valdobbiadene
sollecitato.
with Cartizia, for instance,
Però
was
non-
fully developed.
E quindi è
It
stato il
wasn't present
primo,
in the
quindi
DOC.
siamo contenti anche per
And
il successo
it
che ha
was the
avuto
first
soprattutto a
example.
livello
Very happy about
questo
the
vino qui, perché
success
poi l'extra
that it had,
brut
especially in Italy.
è molto,
You know,
è molto mercato italiano,
extra brut
soprattutto
wines
per il nome,
sell very well
E forse
in the
anche
Italian
locali,
market.
anche
And
locale,
also
ma
the
soprattutto
local
non
market, I would say. Yeah, so I would say
soprattutto
especially in the
non
northern
italiano.
part of Italy.
Mi aggiungere che
I would add
l'extra
that
brut
extra
è
brut
sicuramente molto economico e anche
is very gastronomic and it goes very well sort of more intellectual palates. But
la vince a
back
livello
to
anche
figures, who's the
internazionale.
winner
Probabilmente
internationally
extra dry.
speaking? I would say extra dry.
Allora vince l'extra dry
I would
ancora,
say that the extra
però
dry, yes, is
il
certainly
brut
the
in
winner.
maniera prepotente sta
Yeah, actually Brut is
Questo è un dato molto importante
going
per
up the
capire come
ladder.
il trend si
Yes,
sta
this
evolvendo.
is very important to know to understand how the trend is moving and how
vivendo,
actually
anche se
palettes
devo
are
dire che
becoming
la squadra di
sort
oggi
of
ha dimostrato che c'è un 50
more
e 50
gentle, although
tra l'extra dry e il brut.
actually
Ma torniamo agli
today's
ultimi due.
Aspetta che
taster
devo fare la prima
opted
domanda.
for 50 and 50
Devo
between
rispondere
extra
alla prima
dry and
domanda.
brut. I should answer the
100%
first
glera.
question. Why
100%
100% glera? Well,
Perché
100% glera.
vogliamo sempre la purezza,
So we
del-
always want
in questo caso della
purity,
glera.
in this case of glera
Non vogliamo
grapes.
mescolare
We don't want
altre
to
varietà che
blend
sono
other
consentite come
varietals
i
which
vari tipi
could
di Pinot
be
o
allowed,
il
like different
Chardonnay
types
o
of Pinot or
nella
Chardonnay,
versioni
or as for
autoctone come
DOCG
Pereira
with
o
autochthonous
Carrera,
variations. We have
Bianchetta
Pereira, Bianchetta,
o
or Vertigio.
li vogliamo semplicemente
We want
al
our
meglio,
wines to be
secondo
pure
noi.
in order to better define them, to define request.
Allora, avevamo intavolato una discussione,
Okay, so
avete assaggiato entrambi i vini?
we've tasted both the
Allora,
wines.
vedete che il vino numero 8 ha
wine number
evidentemente
8
una densità maggiore e
has
anche
got a
una
higher density,
dolcezza
thickness,
maggiore, quindi
but
un
it's
residuo
also more
zuccherino
sweet, so it
maggiore.
has got a
Ma
higher
parlavamo
residual
di
sugar.
evoluzione, no? Di
But
età di
with
questi
reference to
vini.
the
Qualcuno ha
evolution,
parlato di Grazia,
someone
quindi un
mentioned
2011.
Grazia
Secondo voi
2011.
tutti concordano con la Grazia?
So do you
Siamo più nella fase di
agree
ricchezza, siamo più nello slancio?
with the
Ricordo, nuovo
grace?
slancio fino
Are
a
we
3
dealing
anni,
with
la ricchezza, la parte
so
centrale,
thickness till 3
diciamo,
years,
e
then
poi
we
la
have the
Grazia
richness,
dal
and
vini
then
che,
grace,
insomma,
starting
arrivano
from
quasi a 10 anni di
wines
vita.
that
Che mi
are
dite? Chi
they're
vota
almost
per
10 years
lo
old. So would
slancio?
go
Quindi
for the
vini fino
first
a 19.
phase. So up
21,
to
20,
19.
19. Chi vota lo slancio? C'è qualcuno per
2021-19. Who would go for this?
Sono la stessa annata, 7-8. Sì, sì.
7 and 8, yeah, same vintage.
Oppure è un vino di ricchezza?
Or is it
Chi vota la
rather
ricchezza?
who would go for richness?
5, 6. Quindi se siamo nella ricchezza siamo un 18,
6 of you,
17,
so
16.
here we're talking about
Ok. E
18,
qualcuno
17,
vota la
16,
Grazia, quindi
and
dal
some would
15
go also
indietro.
for the
Chi vota la
grace.
Grazia? Avevamo uno davanti,
So,
che loro
1,
votavano
2,
anche prima, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6 of you would go for the grace.
Effettivamente
Okay, very
questo
good,
è
very good
un
indeed.
vino che
This
ha
is
un
a
grandissimo
wine
volume,
certainly
profondità, ma
is
si
extremely
tratta di
deep,
un
but
2018. Vi abbiamo
it's
dato un
2018.
ponente
So you
come
tasted
numero
a
8,
Levante
quindi
Ponente
ponente
wine,
numero 7,
7,
Levante numero
so
8 e
Levante
la
number
versione 2018,
6,
quindi
Ponente
una
number
delle
8, and this is the
più belle
2018
degli
vintage,
ultimi
one of the
anni, grande
best
delirio,
vintage of the
e
last few years,
sicuramente
characterized by
dimostra
a high
che
balance.
il Prosecco,
And it shows that
con un metodo
when Prosecco is
vocato alla qualità,
made with a quality method,
può anche
with the
avere
Masottina
un
method,
aging, quindi un potenziale
is one that could be
importante. Quindi
aged.
intanto facciamo un applauso a
And so
Federico.
give a clap to Federico and his team.
Sta dimostrando che il Prosecco non è un vino da bere subito,
Because
ma anzi.
you just showed to us that Prosecco is
Anche
not
perché
a wine to be drinken straight
nessuno
away,
pensa
but
mai
it
a
could be
quanta
aged.
storia
Yes,
e
indeed.
quanta cultura
People tend
c'è
to neglect
dietro
the culture and the
Conegliano
history that
Valdobbiadene,
exists
nato
behind
oltre
Conegliano
100 anni fa.
Valdobbiadene wine
Quindi
that
questo è un po'
more than 100 years ago.
primo
Yes,
vino
indeed.
basso sullo zuccherino.
We've got
Devo
this
dire
wine with a low residual sugar. I
la
have to
variabilità
say
del
that actually,
fa parte del gioco nel mondo del vino.
of course, take into consideration the variability in terms of bottles. I for 2 more bottles. For those of you who were still curious, you couldn't decide maybe. So before leaving, if you want, you can ask our sommelier, whom I should thank. They're all very happy. It's really worthwhile doing it. The 2 new bottles here, this is certainly more fresher, more reactive, evolved. It was a cork tainted at the beginning. Thank you anyway. Thank you for listening to your lots of attention. So thank you all. Cristina, thank you Federico. Thank you all. Roberta would like to say something. Yes, so we should add to the bus now. We would go on for the alchemia, so there are 2 chapters available downstairs. Just follow them, they're wearing red hats.